have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Come on, sing with us. And all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Come on, sing that with us. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No, 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 no. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Sing, there's no shadow. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No, 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 no. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. 'Cause all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. So the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn, I don't deserve, still you give yourself away. 'Cause all the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Good morning, Wesley. My name is Scott, and I am one of the pastors here at Wesley. I wish we could be gathering under different circumstances, but alas, we're here, and we're going to make the best of this situation, and we'll continue to worship, we'll continue to meet, and whether you're seeing this on Sunday morning or you're going to see this at another time during the week, I'm glad that you chose to click on this video and to hear possibly what God may be speaking to you in this moment. We have been in this series called Deep Tracks, and the purpose of this series is to look at obscure people in the Bible, looking at what they may have to say, what those stories that are perhaps overlooked may have to say to us today. And maybe there are these small figures or these stories that have gone overlooked that could have potentially deep meaning. I say that, and I'm going to cheat this morning because I'm going to read a passage that's predominantly about Elijah. And Elijah is pretty well known in the scriptures, but there are two particular individuals in this passage that I think have a bearing on things that can happen in a good way or things that can happen in a bad way. And particularly what I'm looking at in this passage is about the power of prayer. Now, this particular passage, and the reason I'm going to cheat a little bit, is that this particular passage has been on my heart, and there's particularly a song after the message that I'll show you that's been on my heart as well, because it's a song, not to give it away at the beginning, but it's a song of hope. And in these uncertain times, when we are faced with uncertainty around our economy, uncertainty around our health, that we need to engage, I feel like, in a greater sense of prayer and communion, not only with God, but also with each other. And prayer is something, perhaps you didn't know this about me, and it's a reason why I wonder why I'm a pastor, but I'm kind of embarrassed to pray in public. I've mentioned this before, that there was once this person at my dad's church. My dad's a pastor, a retired minister in Florida, and I could swear that this man had a spiritual gift for prayer. It's the words that came out of his mouth it seemed the exact words that everybody needed to hear, and that somebody could take away something from this prayer, and it was deeply comforting. And I don't think I'm the most eloquent person, and yet Paul was his name. He just had this gift, and so there's this element of prayer, I think, maybe with which we can all relate, that perhaps we don't know what to say, we don't know what's effective, we don't know. Perhaps we're afraid of feeling stupid before God, or maybe we haven't done it in a while, or we've not done it at all, and we wonder, how do we even start? And so I want to look at this power of prayer this morning, and tell you a little bit about somebody that in a situation that happened in my last church. We were at a staff meeting, and we had just finished, and this lady had come into the place where we had previously met, and I had not spoken to this lady very much in the past, and yet one thing led to another, and she just began describing some difficult circumstances in her life, very trying circumstances. She had a son, and who was dealing with some custody issues, and it was deeply troubling for her, because she not only cared about her son and cared about her grandchild, but she just didn't know what to do, and she sort of had this crisis of conscience, like how much to get involved, how much to stay away, and I could sense the weight of this burden on her. And I did something that I rarely do. I think a lot of times we say, "Oh, well, I'll certainly be praying for you," and yet I think that's a good thing, but I think there's something to be said about saying, "Hey, can I pray with you right now?" And that's not something that I've typically done boldly. I'm a private, introverted person, and I do pray privately, but to do that with somebody publicly is not something that I'm accustomed to doing. And so I just felt like God saying in the moment that this was the only thing that I knew to do. And so we sat there and we prayed together and prayed that God would have a hand in the situation. Now, this is not a story about how great that I am and how great, let me tell you about how I'm no good at prayer and now all of a sudden God has transformed me into this amazing person. And that's not the point of this. The point is that I think there are urgings and leanings that God places on us, and that God is especially leading us into a life of prayer. And so there are moments when God is pushing us to pray for one another. And I especially say this because I've been in conversation with some folks, and I was particularly relating to how this pandemic was affecting our kids, and talking about how much that they have given up, and how on one hand they're resilient, but yet on another this is a pandemic that is affecting them. This is something that they've not had to deal with and not had to give up over a few months. Some really important elements of their growth and their rites of passage, their childhood, and so as we were talking, we were lamenting about how really the one thing that seems to be hurting us the most and that matters for us the most is this need for connection. We are needing to be in the presence of one another, to pray with one another, to just share life, to do life with one another. And I think especially within the context of the church, and it's really difficult when we can't meet together. And so some of our groups have been meeting throughout the week and have been socially distancing, and maybe through Zoom, and this is good. But certainly we are all in need of connection. Now, I think at some point we struggle with our prayer life. Maybe it's for similar reasons as mine, but I think we would all benefit from the blessing of more effective prayers. And this is, as I was telling you in the beginning, what happens with Elijah. Now, just to set this passage up, give you a little bit of context. As I've preached before, this is in the book of 1 Kings, and there has been this battle royale between Elijah and the prophets of Baal, and they set up two altars, and they were having a whose God is better kind of battle. And on one hand, Elijah says, whoever's altar lights on fire first, that is the one true God. And so Elijah, he approaches King Ahab with this proposal, and he summons the people of Israel and the prophets of Baal and Asherah. And so they have these two altars, and the prophets of Baal spend a long time trying to get their god Baal to light this altar on fire. And at some point, it's kind of hilarious when you read the passage. Elijah is mocking them and kind of insulting them. And then when it becomes time for Elijah's turn, there is this all-consuming fire. Now after this, as it's clear that Elijah and his God is the winner, this is a tale of two responses. In 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 41, it says, Elijah says to King Ahab, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." Now, to keep in mind, there has been a drought for a long time in this period. And a drought is terrible for an agrarian economy, for those who are in need of planting crops, from harvesting those crops, from gathering money from those crops, also from the need of just a simple need of water, and for basic food sustenance. This drought is having a great effect on the health, not only the physical health, but the mental health of all the people around in this time. And so Elijah is pointing to the sign that there is the sound of a heavy rain. After God has done and performed this sign, And he says, now go and celebrate. Now God has demonstrated this power, but is this a test? Is this a test of King Ahab and what his response should be? So in verse 42 it says, Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Mount Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. So we have a tale of two paths where Elijah is going one way to go up to he goes up the mountain to pray. So it's as if this metaphorically he's going up and closer to God to give thanks to God. Meanwhile, King Ahab is in some ways taking credit for what is happening, and he's going down to eat and celebrate, not really acknowledging what God has done with these altars. And this juxtaposition is important, that Elijah is in some ways seen as God's last hope. He is the prophetic voice, the one who's speaking truth to power, who's speaking about God's way and God's will in the lives of these people. And yet Ahab, who is in some ways this obscure character, this obscure king, he is one who is not really following the will of God. He is just benefiting from God's will, from Elijah's faith in living